This is Dallol, Earth's geothermal chemistry on display. The colors look painted, but they're minerals and heat. Heat shimmer makes the horizon feel liquid. Steam rises gently, then vanishes in dry air.
Acid pools glint like mirrors, but they're not safe to touch.
We keep distance. The camera gets the close view. Salt domes grow where brine evaporates relentlessly. Sulfur yellow and iron red stack into layers. Toxic green tones come from chemistry, not filters. Every crust edge is a warning line. This landscape forms fast, then breaks fast. The grout can be thin. We stay on stable paths.
Dallol is hot, low, and brutally exposed.
Here, shade is rare, and time is measured carefully. We'll trace the system, approach, vents, pools, textures.
Then we zoom into crystals at the waterline.
You'll see how heat builds patterns, like circuitry. And how wind erases footprints like they never existed. No music today, only spoken notes and silence. Because Dallol already feels loud, without sound. Watch the light. It changes the chemistry's look. Watch the bubbles, they're the system breathing. Watch the crust. It's always rewriting itself. Let's begin with where the rift opens the earth. Zoom to Ethiopia's Afar lowlands, where plates pull apart. Rifting thins crust, letting heat rise closer to surface.
Dallol sits in a low basin near salt flats.
Brine concentrates here, then crystallizes into ground. Hot fluids carry minerals upward, then cool quickly. Those minerals precipitate into terraces and spires. Sunlight is harsh, so exposure becomes the real challenge. Travel starts early, before the heat peaks. The approach crosses flat salt crust and dusty tracks. Mirage shimmer hides depth, so we move cautiously. A convoy line looks tiny against the emptiness. Water and shade become mission-critical supplies.
A field camp is simple. Top shade, jerry cans, rest. Gear matters. Goggles, gloves, and stable boots.
We avoid fragile crust and keep safe viewpoints.
Wide shots show scale. Macro shots show mechanism.
Dallol's colors are not decoration. They're chemistry records. Each ridge marks a previous pulse of brine. Each pool reflects the sky, then hides acid below.
Steam vents reveal where heat is escaping. Wind carries salt dust, whitening everything nearby. Hard light sharpens shadows into useful outlines.
Flat light reveals subtle texture without glare. We'll use both, depending on time of day.
Our route stays on stable ground only.
Out from. No stepping near thin edges, no heroic closeness.
The safest story is the clearest one.
So we let telephoto and drone do the reach. Now we enter the color field carefully.
You'll notice patterns, like maps without labels.
And textures like crystals built in minutes. Dallol can look still, but it's always active.
Emotion is small. Bubbles, steam, shifting haze.
That small motion makes the place feel alive.
Next, the geothermal engine behind these colors. Because understanding turns shock into wonder.
By noon, heat-warped crust, thin haze drifts sideways with wind. Notice chemical pool. Colors rebalance as the sun angle shifts. Here, heat-warped salt dome. Spires vent softly, never loudly. Up close, volatile crust. Salt dust skims low across flats. In this frame, salt-white salt dome. Crystals form along the waterline. Up close, acidic surface. Crust plates show hairline cracks. Look for iron-stained terrace. Bubbles rise, then pop in slow rhythms. At dawn, acidic vent. Glare hides depth unless you watch texture. By noon, acidic chimney. Crystals form along the waterline. Look for sulfur-bright brine. Edges crumble, then reform after drying.
Up close, salt white terrace. Mineral films reflect the sky like glass.
Look for volatile surface. Crystals form along the waterline. From above, iron-stained terrace. Salt dust skims low across flats.
Next, wind-drawn surface. Brine leaves rings as it evaporates. Look for salt white vent. Ridges stack in layered chemistry.
Notice, heat-warped chimney. Brine leaves rings as it evaporates.
From above, sulfur-bright salt dome. Bubbles rise, then pop in slow rhythms.
Notice, iron-stained chimney. Ridges stack in layered chemistry. Up close, chemical chimney. Spires vent softly, never loudly. From above, sun-hammered crust. Ridges stack in layered chemistry. From above, heat-warped vent. Mineral films reflect the sky like glass.
From above, volatile brine. Steam threads thin out quickly.
Look for wind-drawn vent. Bubbles rise, then pop in slow rhythms. Notice, sun-hammered salt dome. Crystals form along the waterline. Here, sulfur-bright brine. Heat shimmer bends distant ridges. Up close, neon brine. Edges crumble, then reform after drying. Up close, chemical brine. Hard light makes shadows razor sharp. Look for Leon Terrace. Hard light makes shadows razor sharp. Look for sun-hammered pool. Salt dust skims low across flats. Notice sun-hammered surface. Crystals form along the waterline. Now, sulfur-bright chimney. Bubbles rise, then pop in slow rhythms. Next, chemical pool. Salt dust skims low across flats. Here, acidic pool. Bubbles rise, then pop in slow rhythms.
Next, salt white pool. Edges crumble, then reform after drying.
Up close, salt white surface. Hard light makes shadows razor sharp.
Notice, heat-warped terrace. Crystals form along the waterline.
Next, neon chimney. Glare hides depth unless you watch texture. Notice, acidic salt dome. Colors rebalance as the sun angle shifts.
Here, salt white pool. Crust plates show hairline cracks.
Up close, sun-hammered surface. Steam threads thin out quickly. Here, heat-warped chimney. Glare hides depth unless you watch texture. By noon, sun-hammered chimney. Bubbles rise, then pop in slow rhythms.
Up close, chemical crust. Crystals form along the waterline.
Next, acidic terrace. Edges crumble, then reform after drying.
Up close, salt white brine. Edges crumble, then reform after drying.
At dawn, heat-warped chimney. Spires vent softly, never loudly. In this frame, sulfur-bright surface. Crystals form along the waterline. From above, sulfur-bright salt dome. Brine leaves rings as it evaporates. Next, neon brine. Thin haze drifts sideways with wind. Notice, heat-warped surface. Crust plates show hairline cracks. Here, sun-hammered pool. Glare hides depth unless you watch texture. Here, chemical vent. Spires vent softly, never loudly. At dawn, wind-drawn surface. Bubbles rise, then pop in slow rhythms.
From above, acidic terrace, crystals form along the waterline.
We look for salt white chimney, steam threads thin out quickly. Up close, wind-drawn surface, bubbles rise, then pop in slow rhythms. Up close, sun-hammered terrace, mineral films reflect the sky like glass. Notice acidic surface, hard light makes shadows razor sharp. Up close, acidic vent, salt dust skims low across flats. At dawn, acidic salt dome, bubbles rise, then pop in slow rhythms. From above, Dallol terraces, yellow sulfur patches brighten under sun. From above, Dallol terraces, wide pullback shows color as an island. From above, Dallol terraces, macro rims glitter, then dull in glare. By noon, Dallol terraces, steam slips between ridges like thin fog. Here, Dallol terraces, telephoto compresses colors through shimmer. Look for Dallol terraces, iron red bands outline older deposits. At dawn, Dallol terraces, a safe lookout frames pools without stepping closer. At dawn, Dallol terraces, steam slips between ridges like thin fog. At dawn, Dallol terraces, terraces curve like frozen waves of salt. In this frame, Dallol terraces, steam slips between ridges like thin fog.
At dawn, Dallol terraces, green pools sit still, then ripple with bubbles.
Next, Dallol terraces, wide pullback shows color as an island. Here, Dallol terraces, chimneys cast short shadows that move quickly. At dawn, Dallol terraces, wide pullback shows color as an island. Look for Dallol terraces, yellow sulfur patches brighten under sun. At dawn, Dallol terraces, yellow sulfur patches brighten under sun. By noon, Dallol terraces, iron red bands outline older deposits. By noon, Dallol terraces, terraces curve like frozen waves of salt. Now, Dallol terraces, iron red bands outline older deposits. Look for Dallol terraces, green pools sit still, then ripple with bubbles.
Next, Dallol terraces, a safe lookout frames pools without stepping closer.
Here, Dallol terraces, yellow sulfur patches brighten under sun. Notice Dallol terraces, wide pullback shows color as an island. Next, Dallol terraces, green pools sit still, then ripple with bubbles. In this frame, Dallol terraces, iron red bands outline older deposits. Look for Dallol terraces, brine lines trace evaporation like contour maps. Next, Dallol terraces, brine lines trace evaporation like contour maps. In this frame, Dallol terraces, terraces curve like frozen waves of salt. Up close, Dallol terraces, green pools sit still, then ripple with bubbles. In this frame, Dallol terraces, shadows reveal microsteps in the terraces. Now, Dallol terraces. Telephoto compresses colors through shimmer. Up close, Dallol terraces. A safe lookout frames pools without stepping closer. Look for Dallol terraces. A safe lookout frames pools without stepping closer. At dawn, Dallol terraces. Iron red bands outline older deposits. Up close, Dallol terraces. Shadows reveal micro steps in the terraces. Up close, Dallol terraces. Steam slips between ridges like thin fog. Here, Dallol terraces. Iron red bands outline older deposits. Notice, Dallol terraces, macro rims glitter, then dull in glare. From above, Dallol terraces, shadows reveal micro steps in the terraces. Notice, Dallol terraces, telephoto compresses colors through shimmer. Next, Dallol terraces, steam slips between ridges like thin fog. Up close, Dallol terraces. Chimneys cast short shadows that move quickly. By noon, Dallol terraces. Macro rims glittle, then dull in glare. Up close, Dallol terraces. Iron red bands outline older deposits. In this frame, Dallol terraces. Wide pullback shows color as an island. Now, Dallol terraces. Shadows reveal micro steps in the terraces. Up close, Dallol terraces. Telephoto compresses colors through shimmer.
At dawn, Dallol terraces. Chimneys cast short shadows that move quickly.
Next, Dallol terraces. Iron red bands outline older deposits. Here, Dallol terraces. Terraces curve like frozen waves of salt. Now, Dallol terraces. Yellow sulfur patches brighten under sun. Notice, Dallol terraces. Steam slips between ridges like thin fog. Notice, Dallol terraces. Brine lines trace evaporation like contour maps. By noon, Dallol terraces. Wide pullback shows color as an island. In this frame, macro sulfur granules form rough, bright crust.
By noon, macro, a crack line guides brine like a channel.
Notice, macro, evaporation rings form perfect circles. Here, macro, wet shine meets dry crust in one frame. Look for macro, tiny bubbles break and rejoin the surface. At dawn, macro, salt needles grow in clustered fans.
In this frame, macro, evaporation rings form perfect circles.
At dawn, macro, textures shift when wind dries the surface. Notice, macro, tiny bubbles break and rejoin the surface. Next, macro, micro ridges resemble coral, but it's salt. By noon, macro, mineral films ripple like glass skin.
From above, macro, wet shine meets dry crust in one frame.
Now, macro, textures shift when wind dries the surface.
Now, macro, a crystal edge refracts harsh sunlight.
Here, macro. A rack focus reveals depth in crystals.
By noon, macro. Salt needles grow in clustered fans.
Notice, macro. Iron stains create thin, layered bands.
Up close, macro, evaporation rings form perfect circles. Now, macro. A crack line guides brine like a channel. From above, macro. Salt needles grow in clustered fans. In this frame, macro, tiny bubbles break and rejoin the surface. Look for macro. Wet shine meets dry crust in one frame. In this frame, macro. Mineral films ripple like glass skin. In this frame, macro. Salt needles grow in clustered fans. Here, macro. Evaporation rings form perfect circles. By noon, macro. Evaporation rings form perfect circles. Here, macro. Sulfur granules form rough, bright crust.
Up close, macro. Mineral films ripple like glass skin.
Look for macro. A crystal edge refracts harsh sunlight.
Up close, macro. A crystal edge refracts harsh sunlight. Now, macro. Wet shine meets dry crust in one frame.
Here, macro. Iron stains create thin, layered bands.
At dawn, macro. Mineral films ripple like glass skin. In this frame, macro. A crack line guides brine like a channel. By noon, macro. Sulfur granules form rough, bright crust. Notice, macro. Mineral films ripple like glass skin. Here, macro. Textures shift when wind dries the surface. Look for macro. Salt needles grow in clustered fans. At dawn, macro. Tiny bubbles break and rejoin the surface. Here, macro. A crystal edge refracts harsh sunlight. Look for macro. A rack focus reveals depth in crystals. From above, macro. Micro ridges resemble coral, but it's salt. Notice, macro. A crystal edge refracts harsh sunlight. Now, macro. Salt needles grow in clustered fans.
In this frame, macro. Iron stains create thin, layered bands.
Next, macro. A crack line guides brine like a channel.
Look for macro. Mineral films ripple like glass skin. From above, macro. A rack focus reveals depth in crystals. At dawn, macro. Iron stains create thin, layered bands. Next, macro. Salt needles grow in clustered fans. Look for macro. Micro ridges resemble coral, but it's salt.
From above, macro. Iron stains create thin, layered bands.
By noon, macro. A rack focus reveals depth in crystals.
From above, macro. Tiny bubbles break and rejoin the surface. From the marked path, we pause in shade, then move again. From the marked path, we step only where ground is tested stable. On stable ground, measurements happen from safe viewpoints. Safety first. Goggles stay ready for salt dust gusts.
Safety first. The safest route is often slower.
In shade, goggles stay ready for salt dust gusts.
On stable ground, macro shots replace risky closeness.
On stable ground, heat fatigue is silent. We watch for it. Safety first. We keep distance from thin crust edges. With gloves on, we keep distance from thin crust edges.
In shade, the safest route is often slower.
In shade, we observe pools by telephoto only. With gloves on, we step only where ground is tested stable. With gloves on, we pause in shade, then move again. With gloves on, we leave fragile zones untouched.
With gloves on, macro shots replace risky closeness.
In shade, we leave fragile zones untouched. Before noon, we hydrate on schedule, not on thirst. Before noon, goggles stay ready for salt dust gusts.
Before noon, we avoid any splash zones completely.
Safety first. Macro shots replace risky closeness.
Safety first. Heat fatigue is silent. We watch for it.
From the marked path, the safest route is often slower.
In shade, measurements happen from safe viewpoints.
With gloves on, we avoid any splash zones completely. From the marked path, goggles stay ready for salt dust gusts.
In shade, we avoid any splash zones completely.
Before noon, we keep distance from thin crust edges. With gloves on, goggles stay ready for salt dust gusts. On stable ground, we hydrate on schedule, not on thirst. With gloves on, measurements happen from safe viewpoints. Safety first. We pause in shade, then move again. In shade, we hydrate on schedule, not on thirst. With gloves on, heat fatigue is silent. We watch for it.
Before noon, heat fatigue is silent. We watch for it.
From the marked path, we leave fragile zones untouched.
With gloves on, the safest route is often slower. With gloves on, we hydrate on schedule, not on thirst.
On stable ground, the safest route is often slower. From the marked path, we keep distance from thin crust edges. From the marked path, measurements happen from safe viewpoints. Across the flats, we pack early to avoid midday exposure. On the return, sunset warms ridges, softening the glare. On the return, a distant convoy line becomes a thread. Across the flats, the emptiness makes Dallol feel even stranger. On the return, silence returns once the wind drops. At camp, tracks stretch out, then blur in wind. Across the flats, stars appear fast in dry desert air. At dawn, humans stay tiny. The place dominates. At camp, the emptiness makes Dallol feel even stranger. Between shoots, humans stay tiny. The place dominates. Between shoots, silence returns once the wind drops. At dawn, salt dust whitens gear in minutes.
Across the flats, salt dust whitens gear in minutes. At sunset, the color field sits quiet, still active.
On the return, stars appear fast in dry desert air.
At sunset, humans stay tiny. The place dominates. Between shoots, water and shade become the whole plan.
At dawn, tracks stretch out, then blur in wind. Across the flats, sunset warms ridges, softening the glare. At dawn, we pack early to avoid midday exposure. Across the flats, the color field sits quiet, still active. On the return, morning cool is brief, then disappears.
At sunset, a distant convoy line becomes a thread.
At dawn, the color field sits quiet, still active.
On the return, the color field sits quiet, still active.
At sunset, water and shade become the whole plan.
Between shoots, stars appear fast in dry desert air. Between shoots, morning cool is brief, then disappears.
At camp, silence returns once the wind drops.
Between shoots, tracks stretch out, then blur in wind. Across the flats, silence returns once the wind drops. Between shoots, We pack early to avoid midday exposure. At sunset, tracks stretch out, then blur in wind.
At dawn, water and shade become the whole plan. At camp, a distant convoy line becomes a thread.
Between shoots, the color field sits quiet, still active. Dallol proves Earth can look unreal without any filters. Heat and brine write patterns like circuitry on salt.
Colors shift with light, but chemistry stays constant.
Steam fades fast, reminding you how dry air is.
Macrocrystals show growth happening in real time. Wide shots show how small the color island is. Wind erases tracks and restores blankness.
This landscape forms, breaks, and forms again.
Respect is the entry fee. Distance, patience, caution.
No heroic steps, only stable ground and clear choices. The harsh sun teaches scheduling as survival.
Shade teaches humility in minutes.
Dallol's beauty is fragile because the crust is.
So we watch without touching what can't forgive.
In silence, the place feels even more intense. Because your eyes do all the work here.
If you want more extremes, stay with this series.
We'll visit cold, altitude, and fire next. But Dallol is pure chemistry, right at the surface. It's Earth's engine, exposed in color and steam. When we leave, the glare lingers behind the eyes. And the patterns stay, like after images of heat.
Subscribe for more harsh places on Earth. Sup and round and wendiang and nide and andinaril and wrong at sang.
Until next time, keep curiosity, keep respect.